All right. Hello, everybody. I'm going to give everyone a little time to jump in, but in the meantime, I'd love to know where everyone's calling in from. So I usually call in from New York. If you've attended any of the previous two webinars, you might know that. But I'm actually in Rhode Island right now, which, if you're not from the US, it's the smallest state in the country. So I'm curious where everyone else is calling in from. Give some people some time to file in, and then we'll start in just a minute. And Brendan, you're in Maryland, right?
I am. Yeah, I muted myself to type it. But yeah, I'm in Maryland, which is on the smaller side of U.S. states, but not quite as small as Rhode Island,
Yeah, nothing
which
is, right?
is not spelled like you think it is with road, and is also not an island. But that's more fun facts about Rhode Island today. But I guess
Yeah.
we could do a whole stream on fun facts about Rhode Island.
Yeah, we'll do that next. Seeing a lot of interesting places in the chat.
Yeah, a lot of folks in Europe, up from the Philippines, some other U.S. folks. I was wondering how many U.S. folks we'd get today because for those of you outside the U.S., tomorrow is a holiday in the U.S. called Thanksgiving, and then the next day is maybe even a bigger holiday for the U.S., which is Black Friday, which is where all the shopping happens for Christmas and the other holidays. So yeah, a lot of folks probably in the U.S. are off today as well.
Yep, definitely.
I know my kids are. So if you hear a lot of like rambunctious noise, it's because my four children are home from school today.
Awesome. All right, I think we got a good amount of people in here, so I think we can go ahead and start up the chat. So I'm gonna share my screen. Oops. And all right, so let's dive in. All right, we're back already, right? So I just hosted a webinar on the Opus 4.5 launch and Kilo autocomplete just 2 days ago. But today we had the chance to do something a little bit new and different. So I'm Brian. I'm a developer relations engineer here at Kilo Code. And some of you might have already seen me on the silver stream screen in past webinars. But today I'm joined by my colleague Brendan, who is a verifiable Kilo webinar veteran. And very shortly, we're going to be joined by Marius from Anthropic, who will give us an inside look on the very exciting Opus 4.5 model launch. So, as I mentioned, Anthropic launched Claude 4.5, which is their latest state-of-the-art frontier AI model. And I actually just hosted that webinar, as I said, on Monday, going through all of the technical ins and outs and some benchmarks. So for this session, we're going to do something a little bit different. And we're just going to open it up to a roundtable chat with Brendan and I, where we'll discuss various topics related to how the launch of Opus 4.5 will affect the landscape of AI engineering. And we'll be watching the chat as we go for any questions and comments. And then we'll be joined by Marius from Anthropic, and we'll get a chance to ask him some burning questions. So that's the agenda: roundtable discussion, AMA with Anthropic, and then Q&A. And just for some brief context, right? In case you missed it, Anthropic launched Claude Opus 4.5 on Monday, and it boasts significant upgrades from previous Claude models, including in reasoning, difficult coding tasks and repo level work, agentic capabilities and long horizon tasks, tool and computer use, context usage and memory, and then vision, which is its ability to interpret screenshots, UI heavy images, and multiple images in context. So on their side, they're calling it the best model in the world for coding, agents, and computer use. And they're backing that up with benchmarks, right? It's currently leading most of the well-known benchmark tests for AI coding, including those for solving bugs, using tools, and performing software engineering tasks. So I just want to take a quick minute to look back on how far we've come in the last year, right? In November of 2024, the best performing AI model was Claude's Sonnet 3.5, which scored 49% on SWE Bench Verified, which is a benchmark that measures real world bug fixing in real code bases. And if we fast forward to today, where we have Opus 4.5, it scored nearly double that, being the first model to break 80% on SWE Bench. And that's an incredible achievement, right? But it's not just a number. So the first topic I want to discuss as our roundtable chat kicks off is how different does AI coding feel in November 2025 with Claude Opus 4.5 than it did just a year ago from today in November 24? So Brennan, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it it's kind of insane to how fast it's progressed, and then like even you mentioned on the last webinar like we're getting new models dropped every couple days now.
Yep.
And so I think two things feel different. One, like I do think that models are starting to understand your intent a lot better, right? Like I remember a year ago, I could get the model to do what I wanted, but it took a lot more, like felt like it took a lot more effort on my end to get the right prompt, right? And so I was like rolling the dice a lot more and changing my prompt. And I definitely feel with the newer models, especially with Opus 4.5, that like, they talk about this in the release. It's like the ability to follow intent better. That
Yeah.
that is definitely something I'm feeling, and have been feeling since we were, able to get access to Opus 4.5 a little while ago. Um, and yeah, it's like I think that is definitely where I think a lot of the model labs are focusing their efforts.
Yeah.
Um, you know, that we don't necessarily all have to become amazing prompt engineers in order to get something amazing out of it, right?
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that is a huge part of it for me as well. Like we have the prompt enhancer feature in Kilo Code. So if you haven't seen that, when you're typing your chat up to the right, there's like a little magic stick, and you can click that, and it will like enhance your prompt with more details and context. And I almost feel like that is sort of what happened with these models over the last year too, right? Like a year ago, you would really have to be explicit about what you wanted, and even then, it could have the chance of becoming a little misled or not really inferring some of the subtleties that you didn't articulate in your prompt. And I almost feel like in the past year that prompt enhancer has been turned on like by default when you're talking to these frontier models. Feels like they can almost read your mind a little bit and infer some of those pieces that you missed in articulating in your prompt. So that's definitely one thing. Another thing that I noticed was the front end capabilities. And I think like a year ago, it was probably unrealistic to expect um, like one prompt to generate a end-to-end working app with like an aesthetic front end that didn't look identical to every other front end that would be AI generated. I don't even know if that was possible then. And now I feel like that is so variated, and you can get like a really unique app with just one prompt in some of these frontier models. And I've shown that in the past webinars with my iterations on our favorite demo project, Kilo Man, where using different models and slightly different prompts, you can get like a completely different and unique game, which is really fun as like a hobbyist developer.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's like that's a lot of the positives. I think, also like if we're thinking about using it in a professional environment, it's like one thing that's changed over that year is that like increase in the number of models, which maybe like
Right.
for a professional developer like can really cause like the paradox of choice, right? It's like how do I know like which model to use and how much to pay attention? And so I think that is in some ways getting tougher, right? And like Simon Williamson, who writes a lot about this, wrote about how like evaluating new models is getting more difficult as we get all these new models because yeah, it's like if Opus 4.5 can get 80% on SWE bench, it's like SWE bench starts to become less and less valuable as a metric as
Right.
like if we're gonna beat it, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Totally.
and so that's an interesting thing that I don't know that I have the answer for, but I think it's something that like folks are gonna have to figure out how to evaluate for themselves of like, how do I deal with this kind of like paradox of choice of like all these different models?
Yeah. Like what happens when a model hits 100% on SWE bench? Right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't. Yeah, and I don't think that means like my opinion. In my opinion, that's not the point where we're like, up, developers are over. Right. It's like
Right. Right.
that's the point where how you use these tools becomes almost more important than the tool itself and the intelligence the tool brings. It's like
Yeah.
you've got to figure out for yourself like what are the ways that I can like leverage this like inherently non-deterministic thing,
Yeah.
but do it in a way that like helps me build deterministic systems like I am, as a software engineer.
Yeah, and that kind of leads me into another topic I want to talk about, which you've referenced, in your past webinars, which is that um, you can kind of treat AI coding agents like a junior developer, right? Like you've mentioned that they're very eager to contribute, they don't get tired. They want to help, but sometimes they can be, confidently wrong, as you've put it. So how does these new frontier models like Opus 4.5 affect one, the role of junior developers and people that are seeking to get into development as a entry level, engineer, and then on the other hand, engineering leaders who are managing these junior developers and also have like a really powerful coding agent in the mix. So,
Yeah.
how does this model change that whole
Yeah. I
dynamic?
mean, I think again, as these models, especially like Opus 4.5 come on, and start doing very well at this kind of, testable benchmark things. I
Hmm.
think for both, for every engineer, it makes like, you know, your expertise in this specific syntax less important, but
Right.
your expertise in, the what I call the engineering part of software engineering more important, which is like, how should we architect a system to know that we're going to get, the results out of it we want. I think that's really important. Again, if we go back to like, again, Simon Williamson's a great example. Theo of like T3 Chat, both of them talked about using Opus 4.5 specifically to like refactor existing code bases they have. Like,
Hmm.
um, for Simon, it's his like SQLite utils that he has and releases and maintains, and for Theo, it was, upgrading a version of the like AI library he uses in T3 Chat. And so Simon wrote about that, and then Theo put a video out about that I think are really, really interesting answers to your question, which is like, as these become more accurate, right, in terms of syntax,
Yeah.
actually, it's their like senior engineering leadership of knowing what they want that helped them, you know, steer the model in the right direction, and now it listens to that steering better. Great, right? It like tests itself better because it's got better access to tools. Great. But none of that kind of replaced them. It just helped. Um, it just helped them like get more meaningful code out of it, rather than just kind of banging
Right.
their head against the wall and like, oh, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And so it actually accelerated them. And to your point on front end, Theo's project that he was working on is called Snitch Bench. It's a really interesting benchmark about like, how often will AI snitch on you to the government or the media if you're doing something illegal or unethical. And he's actually shipping a new UI that he built with Opus 4.5 to that, right?
Okay.
And it's the first time he's like really liked, and his video goes through like all these different models in UI. And so, yeah, I think the front end really shines through there as well.
Yeah, that's super interesting. I'll have to check out that benchmark. That's funny. Um, so the last question I think before we bring Marius on is that so like being that Opus 4.5 is so good at reasoning and these long horizon tasks and architecture, but being a frontier model, it might be a little more expensive than some of these lightweight open source models. Like, how can developers use different models in tandem to accomplish like a big project, or when should you use Opus for
Hmm.
what tasks, and when should you switch to maybe a free or cheaper model?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And like, I think, I I'm at a little disadvantage to evaluate this because
Yeah.
I have, a lot of sponsored, unsurprisingly, my employer sponsors a lot of AI credits. Um, and so I end up using, I always used to run back to Sonnet. I think now, much like Theo said in his stream, like, I think Opus 4.5 is probably my default now. But I definitely have found, and our community on Discord talks about a lot, what if you use one of these frontier models that's more expensive, um, you can do that to plan and then use a free or cheap model to execute. And the
Right.
model is going to, that smarter, more expensive model is going to have a good, understanding of like what needs to happen. And the cheaper coding models are great at implementing those things once you have a very specific spec to implement
Right.
to, right? And so I think you need something smart, either you as the human or you and a frontier model to create the spec, and then you can have, cheaper or free models go execute it.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I want to invite Marius on stage now because we have a lot of great questions for him. And I think a lot of people are excited about the fact that we have an inside look from Anthropic. So, um, Marius, if you want to join the stage, we can kick off that Q&A. I'm going to stop sharing my screen as well. So yeah, welcome, Marius. If you want to give like a quick bio about yourself, and then we can start asking some questions.
Of course. Yeah, good to be here. My name is Marius. I'm on the Applied AI team here at Anthropic. Just to give you like a quick overview of what our team does, we are a customer-facing team. So we help users make the most out of our models. What that translates to is better prompting, better evals, understanding the capabilities that we were launching with better and making use of them. But we're also the team that gets to play with the models first when they come out. So it's a very exciting job.
Yeah, I'd imagine. So I guess my first question would be like, what are you most excited to be building with Opus 4.5? And when you were testing it, like what excited you most about the new model?
Yeah, I think one of my goals is to automate my job away and just have Claude do everything for me. And that involves a lot of tasks. There's the coding piece, there's putting together evals, but there's also the interaction with customers. So I want Claude to be able to do the admin work for me and be really good at producing those artifacts or those assets like spreadsheets, PowerPoint presentations, but also like be very smart when it comes to debugging. Why is this eval failing, and how can you help me make it better? Where is the model, where is the model struggling, and how can we mitigate that?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And to your point about the fact that you got to experience the model like while it was training and before it was released, it's probably hard to know, from your standpoint, when to stop training and say this model is ready. So looking at Opus 4.5 now, is there anywhere where you feel it could still use some work or direction? And what's on the backlog for the next iteration of Claude models?
Yeah, I guess you can always keep training and make the models better, and that that thing is true.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've noticed with Opus 4.5 that it's already significant different than the Sonnet 4.5, and it will add a lot of value right now to the users. You probably like heard of a story of Claude becoming a senior engineer. He was able to like crack the coding tests, the take home that we give to folks in a performance engineering team, which is a very very hardcore team, and it did there better than any other human, which is a little bit concerning. But
yeah,
it makes you think like, what is the future of software engineering? Are we all becoming EMs, PMs? What's next? So I think having that benchmark or that achievement gave us the confidence that, okay, this is a game changer. We want to put it out there, want to release it, we want people to use it. Going forward, I think you guys already talked about this, but long horizon task is something that we're thinking of. We managed to achieve like a 30-hour coding session with Sonnet 4.5. Opus 4.5 did much better there, but we want to live in a world where you can just kick off tasks through the model and get the work done without too much prompting, without too much feedback. So I think that's where the world is heading.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And speaking to your point about what the future of AI engineering is, do you have an opinion on whether we're all just becoming EMs or PMs, or as someone who's, I'm sure, a developer in your own right, like how do you feel about the progression of these tools and how it relates to your own development, experience?
Yeah, I hope so. I hope we're becoming the tastemakers, like of what's a good app, and what feels good. So maybe a combination of the EM and the PM job.
Right.
I don't think we're there yet. I still get frustrated waiting for Cloud Code to complete a task. It's like, why is this not happening faster? So I can just go on to the next iteration and provide my input there. So I think we'll, we're still waiting for that.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, and I wanted to bring in one of the questions from the audience, if that's okay. One was, are there prompting strategies that you'd recommend that worked well, maybe with an earlier model that like you should think about adjusting when using 4.5? Like, is there any change? We talked a little bit about some of that, but I'd be interested in your perspective on that.
Yeah, we do recommend with these like stronger models to do a little bit of a cleanup for your prompts. Just because with older models, you probably need to add some instructions that will guide a model in the direction that it was just not working. Right now, that's not the case. I think the model is a little bit more aligned with what you want from it. So it just follows instructions more directly.
Mm-hmm.
And what we also noticed is if your prompt contains some contradictory statements, this is even worse with like higher intelligence models because they do try to follow all the instructions at once, and they kind of fail to do that. While the older models will be more forgiving.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then a question I have in my mind, I think again we heard me ask it almost to myself in real time. It's like, how do you think we should think about deciding when to use Opus 4.5 versus Sonnet 4.5? And maybe I'll throw in Haiku there too, right? Because they're all at 4.5 now. Be interested in your perspective on that.
Yep. Well, I do have the luxury to not have to pay for tokens. So from personal perspective, I always use Opus. But I understand that there's some cost concern, and the team has made some significant improvements there. The new Opus is much cheaper than the old Opus. We do want this to become the daily driver because people loved Opus 4.1. It was just you always had to think of like the cost kind of trade-off. I think it's an easier decision right now with the better pricing. I would try to lean into, especially for agentic loops, I would try to lean into Opus 4.5 because there is this concept of token efficiency over the long term, over like n loops. Since the model is just making better decisions of what to call, that will reduce the amount of turns it needs to take. So that overall will like save you a lot of tokens. So I would always start with an Opus just to see like how much the task costs, not exactly how much the prompt costs. And then from there, play out with Haiku 4.5 if you see something that's worth that's worth like trimming. I don't know, Sonnet 4.5. It's kind of like a middle ground. I would prefer maybe to use the Opus with like the effort level set to medium or to low. I think the new model has like a new parameter that you can turn there. So given that it's same model personality, you don't need to like change your prompts or like understand like how a new model is behaving. I would just stick to this one and just play with the effort level.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And speaking to that, context efficiency that you were talking about. So Opus 4.5, notably sticks with the 200K context window, while I believe Sonnet is 1 million and some other competitors are pushing that 1 million token window. So could you explain, your thought process there? And given longer contexts mean higher costs, is there like a sweet spot that you'd recommend before compressing that context?
Yeah, I think it's just a matter of time when the 1 million context will get released. I don't think this is like a decision that we're not going to release it. I think it's just a sequencing problem.
Mm-hmm.
I guess from past experience, we've seen context raw at around 400,000 tokens. So maybe try to stay under that, but it's like very dependent on the task that you're doing. So if you have like a spreadsheet agent, like it's very much different than a coding agent. I've seen teams having to compact regardless. So if your compaction algorithm is good, that could work at 200 or at 1 million, just fine, and you don't have to deal with the context rot problem.
Yeah, no, I get that. And kind of building off of that, so you launched Opus 4.5 at a third of the previous Opus price. And there's maybe a sentiment out there amongst developers that AI models are sort of racing to the bottom and getting more and more commoditized. So how do you see that?
I think like in general, I don't think too much about the race to the bottom. I think like that's even more intense for the cheaper models, like the Flash 2.5, or like the very cheap that can be easily replaced with an open source model. I think that is definitely a race to the bottom. I think for like the higher intelligence tasks, there's always as long as we have tasks that cannot be solved currently with the current models, there's always like a room for launching something that's more impressive and can do more for you. Therefore, you can charge more. So kind of like staying at the frontier. That's our ethos here at Anthropic, and we're always looking for tasks that cannot currently be solved, so we can work on those.
Yeah, totally. And then we have another question from the chat, which is, can you talk a little bit more about the new feature, advanced tool use? So is that a feature of all of the tool enabled models, or just Opus, and how does that work?
It's probably referring to like programmatic tool calling and tool search tool. Yeah, those are amazing. I've been waiting for those because I do have some customers that have been I've been working with for some time, and we tried all kinds of techniques to compact and offload context, and now with this new feature, I'm just going to say, hey, just use the feature.
Yeah.
So programmatic tool call, it works really well for like agents that have tools which return a lot of data. So let's say you're working on an AI SRE. And an AI SRE is going to go ahead and pull logs. So let's say we pull the logs for the past day for this service, or pull the metrics for this service for the past week. And that's a high volume of data. Now, before this feature, that data had to be passed into the context, and that will like definitely fill up the context very, very quickly, even with the 1 million tokens. Right now, what the model can do is call those tools programmatically, so in a Python script, and it's all transparent. You don't have to do anything. You just mark your tool as a programmatic tool call, and it will reason about the results of the data in a Python script, and the Python script can filter things out or look for something up, and then pass in that condensed information back into context window, so the context just stays very relevant and doesn't really get polluted by this large volume. So that's a programmatic tool call. Best use cases are AI SRE, or even like spreadsheet agents that pull in a lot of data from different sheets and have to like wrangle with that. And the next feature is tool search tool. So if you live in a world where you have like 100 tools, or maybe more than 100, those tools eat up a lot of the context because the descriptions need to be thorough. And we notice that if you go above 50, maybe the precision is not that great. So what this feature does, allows you to have a massive amount of tools and let Claude search through the tools. And there's two different ways that you can search, through grep or through some semantic searching. I think it's just less engineering from like users and agent builders that needs to go into what they're doing. They can just use this tool instead of like having to implement this on their own, which is kind of like an annoying task, an annoying feature to write.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great. Well, I know we're almost at time, and really appreciate you spending the time with us. But maybe just one last question that's maybe related to what you were just talking about a little bit, and I think it would be really interesting. Like, obviously, those of us that are writing harnesses have their opinion, but I want your opinion on how much have you seen those harnesses that are using the model impact the performance of the model versus, obviously what your research team is doing to improve the model itself?
Yeah, I think it takes effort to build a good harness and also to maintain it, especially if you want to always be at the frontier, always like have the latest models work for your harness, and also have the ability to swap out different models. I think it takes a lot of effort. We do have the agent SDK that we encourage people to use right now, and it's picking up pretty well, which is just like a bare bones loop with the minimum amount of features that you would need from harness. You have the compaction, you have like the sub agents, like anything that you would implement from scratch, and then you can just take that and adapt it. Me personally, I always like to start from that, so I always just point Claude to Claude Code to the docs for Agent SDK and have it a go. But I'm not maintaining like a full feature product, so that story can be different. I think one maybe takeaway here for agent harness builders is to always try to I guess like prune prompts, but also adapt the harness for a new model. I think it's worth taking advantage of the latest what's out there. There was like a blog post from Cognition when we launched Sonnet 4.5 of how they kind of changed all their harness when we launched the model, and they noticed that there was a significant performance just because they trimmed down a lot of the unnecessary stuff. It's just the fact that the models are getting smarter, and you just have to give it the right tools, and they will do what you want. Much better than instruction following. So maybe that's the end game. Just the model does everything for you, and your harness is just a for loop. But hope we get to that world.
Yeah, definitely. And I know we're kind of over time now, so I just want to say thank you so much, Marius. I'm super grateful that you joined us. I feel like we got a lot of great insights, and I'm sure our viewers are super happy to have you here. So yeah, thanks again, and I really appreciate the time.
Thanks, guys. It was fun hanging out.
Yeah,
Thanks,
definitely.
Marius.
See you soon. So Brendan and I know we're kind of going over time here, so there's no pressure for anyone to stay, but I think we're gonna answer just a few more non-Anthropic specific related questions from the chat here, and we'll also follow up after the webinar async to answer some of these questions. So I saw one that said when I was talking about the SWE bench verified benchmark, they wanted to know what it was and what it actually means that Opus 4.5 was performed better than Sonnet. So SW bench verified is basically a human validated, human judged test consisting of 500 real world software engineering problems from open source Python repositories. They basically put these agents up to the task of solving as many as they can. So basically the Sonnet 3.5 that I referenced, that score from last year at 49%, basically means that they were able to answer about half the problems, whereas Opus 4.5 was able to answer 80% of them. And so that's like a huge jump, especially given that these tests, have different varied degrees of difficulty. And it's one of the benchmarks that, most people reliably judge new model releases by, the performance of new models. So that's the answer to that one. And we're gonna just kind of scroll through the chat here and look out for some more questions. So
yeah, I can answer one while you're looking
Yeah.
for the next one. I am typing an answer in it, but someone asked about parallel agents. So again, that's a very, very Kilo specific question, but we do now have parallel agents in the Kilo Code CLI. So I've linked to the docs there in the answer to the question. I'll just copy and paste this into chat as well. And it's coming soon to the IDE. And you can see more about that at kilo.ai/next and some of the other things that we're working on. I would say spoiler alert, but it's public, so not really a spoiler alert. Yeah, and then another question. Sorry, Brian, if you found one, but I'm going to answer one more here that I just saw come in about what's Kilo doing to avoid overloading context to models with several MCPs? Yes. So that's part of what Marius was talking about there. And so that's why I think it's relevant to answer. Oh, I can click start live answer. I don't know what that does. Oh, it brings it up. Look at that.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah. So yeah, the plan is to, first of all, like, I think encouraging you to be a context engineer and think through the MCPs that you have enabled at any given time is really valuable. But then I also think that there's, stuff that we can do on the Kilo side to say, either suggest that or put some automation around that. So I think that's a great question. And today I would say giving you the insight to the context is really critical so that you can be smart and be the human engineer there, engineering the context. But in the future, there's probably things that we can do to help make suggestions.
Yeah, definitely. Do you have another one? Because I found one as well.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry,
Yes,
I got excited.
No, it's all good. Yeah, I'm glad. So someone asked when every week we have the new best coding AI model, which has been true over the past month, right? We've gotten new models that have just crushed the benchmarks every week. So they asked which capabilities are being prioritized, and they said they feel that as of now, it just feels like every model is good enough for coding. So I think, as Alessia answered a different question in the chat, our colleague, AI coding agents are another tool for software developers, and tools change. And I think they all kind of, because of the non-deterministic nature of AI models, they almost have their own personalities. And I think it comes down to sort of testing them yourself, figuring out what works best in your workflow, and then also considering the cost and the abilities that the model providers were thinking of or prioritizing in each model release. So, for example, like we said, Opus 4.5 really excels at front-end development and architecture of those large projects. So maybe you'd consider using that model for those tasks. And as Brendan mentioned earlier, switching to a lighter weight model for maybe smaller implementations and things. And I think that, at least for the time being, we are going to keep seeing that these models do have different strengths and personalities and tendencies. So I don't know if we're at the point yet where they're all so good that they're indistinguishable. And from my personal perspective, I'm just excited for what each one brings, and it feels like an incredible rate of change still. So that'd be my answer. I don't know if Brendan, you have anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think it can be kind of overwhelming,
Mhm.
especially when you're not, Brendan and Brian, who are in it every day, and you're an engineer just trying to get your job done. So I'm actually working on writing that. I'm trying to answer the way I think to answer this question is, what's the minimum as a average developer that I need to understand about these models in order to do my job well. And so I'm going to be actually writing a blog about that. But I'm super interested in what other people think about it too, because again, that's like, I'm going to be biased to my own thoughts here. But I do think at least understanding, what a given model is good at, and then the scale at which you can give that model something and let it go and come back, that's kind of the minimum. And so, learning that I think is great. And I think understanding that Opus is, this large model that can do a lot of things, can spend longer time, right? Like other models from, like a Gemini 3 or, that the premier models at the other labs are in a similar vein versus, these smaller models, maybe the open source models, those can do like really focused tasks really well and fast. I think that's maybe the minimum, but then, yeah, I also think it's not a great idea to say that every engineer now has to wake up every day and think about what a new model means to their day-to-day life.
No doubt. And someone had in the chat had a good analogy that they said some models are good at baking, some at cooking, and others at building houses. And I feel like that's a pretty astute analogy.
Oh, there's an analogy in there for sure. I like that. I might have to steal that.
Yeah, definitely. I see another question in the chat. Someone said, any chance for plan mode like Kiro? So we actually have two specialized modes that I think might apply to that, which is orchestrator and architect. So orchestrator mode basically distributes a task into smaller subtasks for all our different agent modes to tackle independently. And then architect mode plans a full-on architecture plan for the project based on your prompt, and puts it in a markdown file for the other modes to reference if needed. So so we do already have that, and if you haven't given it a shot yet, I'd recommend trying it out.
Yeah, great. And I've got another one here. Advice on reducing the cost of large tasks. So yeah, I think a key there is to, you know, I think this goes back to my junior developer analogy, and not to just keep harping on it, but I do. It's like, I do think that breaking down large tasks is really critical, right? I mean, we do have some of these AI labs, as they're saying, like focused on longer running things, 30 minutes, hours of running. And that's great. Again, especially in a world where you can like trust that you've got the right prompt that's going to give you the right output. Because like if at the end of that hour-long session you get 70,000 lines of code, like obviously that's not going to be super valuable unless you can really trust that. And that is going to cost a lot of money, obviously, to run for that long period of time.
Right.
And so I still think that breaking down larger tasks into more manageable things is something that the human needs to do in a way that makes it more consumable. I'll give a real world example that it just was dealing with, right? So we have this models page, kilo.ai/models, and it brings together data from a bunch of different sources. And I wrote it originally, me, and I did a bad job of it. And it needs better caching, and it needs better, like it needs to be way smarter, because I want it to be indexable, but it's got dynamic data. And so, there's a lot of like iffy engineering things there. And so I was refactoring that and adding some endpoints to our API to do it. And I gave kind of a pretty generic prompt to the AI, and I didn't point it in the right direction. And it ended up using like some of these older patterns in our code base, and we've added TRPC since to our code base, and it didn't use that. And I had forgotten to mention TRPC to it, right? Like all of that means that this was a large task that I didn't break down enough, right?
Right.
And it ended up actually in like one of our engineers not being, he wasn't upset with me, but he was like, hey, why did you not use TRPC? And I was like, oh yeah. And like, so him and I had to go through a couple of like human loops there, right?
Right.
And so again, that's an example where like as a human, I should have done a better job breaking down the task and being specific in the context I gave it. And I think that's still true, right? And I was using probably some frontier model with that. And I just didn't give it the right context and break down the task enough to begin with.
Yeah, no, it totally makes sense. And someone posted a follow-up question to this in our last question, which said, what do you use first, architect or orchestrator? And someone also mentioned that you can create your own modes, and that they created a whole army, back-end developer, front-end developer, database architect, UI designer, UX designer, tester, etc. Yeah, so you can create your own custom modes for whatever your workflow requires. So, and then going back to the orchestrator versus architect question, really depends on your workflow. Like if you're just looking to create an architecture plan, then maybe you'll switch to architecture. But if you're trying to have Kilo code, agentically orchestrate the whole task, then you would probably use orchestrator, and that'll hand off to architect at some point to create that plan. So yeah.
Yeah, I think that's really, really valuable. And a related question is this, like, do we have a video series for this? Great idea. We do have, and I'm biased because I made it, but there's a video on orchestrator mode that I think talks about the other modes a lot, because of course orchestrator mode uses those other modes. But Brian and I are both actually actively working on additional learning capability videos for like, how do I do this well in a professional environment? So stay tuned to our docs, and then also stay tuned for a big announcement, hopefully by the end of the year, for a big series on all of this.
Yep, super excited about that. All right, so I know we're pretty far over time here, so I think we're gonna call it. We're gonna answer as many questions as we can after the call, async, and we'll make sure to share the recording and the answers to those questions, and a recap blog on that, and we'll make sure to give out those credits that we promised as well. So I just want to say thanks so much, everyone, for joining. We love doing these webinars. I'm excited to do the next one already. Hope you got a lot out of this, and stay tuned for more.
Take care and have a happy Thanksgiving if you're in the U.S. and if you're not in the U.S. but you work with U.S. people, have some very productive days of us not bothering you.
All right, cool. Well, thanks everybody. Talk soon.